Man who was mocked by real estate agents over 10 feet wide house gets last laugh. He decided to renovate the house, dipping into his savings and salary to see his dream turn into reality. Everybody laughed at him, from his family and friends to agents who could have helped him instead. But as the house neared completion, he realized one glaring truth. When Liam Presley's grandpa passed, the only thing he left in his name was a derelict house in Charlestown, Boston. The house was like nothing he'd ever seen in person. The first time he lay eyes on it, he choked back a cry, not because it was the beauty of a house, but because he felt betrayed by his beloved grandpa. 30-year-old Liam was the youngest of the Warren family in Boston, an influential family that had its roots in the country's liberation more than 400 years past. For Liam, being a Warren had always seemed like a burden. His life was constantly under scrutiny from the public eye and his family. But unknown to him, this would soon change. Of course, Liam appreciated and did not take for granted all the gifts that came with being a Warren. He went to a good school and got a great start in his career as an architect. But something would happen that would change his life forever. One evening, Liam was away from home when his mom called with news about his grandpa, who'd been ailing for some time. Not knowing what to expect, Liam quickly answered. The news would leave him shattered. Liam's mom told him that his grandpa had sadly passed away. Liam froze with his phone stuck to his ear. He tried to speak but couldn't. Out of all the Warrens, he'd been the closest to his grandpa and he'd idolized the man for all his accomplishments in life. Liam even became an architect because his grandpa was one and he'd groomed Liam to love everything that came with designing houses. Liam didn't know how much his grandpa's passing would affect his life. Days passed and Liam's grandpa was laid to rest alongside his forefathers in a beautiful ceremony. Soon after, his lawyer read his will, informing Liam what his grandpa had left for him. At first, Liam was furious that he'd been left a derelict house in Charlestown while the rest of his family got better ends of the deal. He only realized his late grandpa's motives when he visited the place. The house that stood before Liam was a 1,165 square feet skinny house with chipped paint and broken windows. The lawn was overgrown, showing no one had been here for years. Additionally, most of the wood was rotting away and there seemed to be no furniture inside. Liam opened the door and entered the house. Broken-hearted by what his grandpa left for him, he turned, ready to go. Then, he noticed something about the place that raised his eyebrows. The house's architecture was unlike what Liam was used to. He realized then that the house was a time capsule from the 19th century. His mouth fell open as he looked around, assessing every inch of the place. He smiled, thanking his grandpa for leaving such a gem in his name. Then, he had an absurd idea that would turn everything around. "I'll renovate it, make it a passion project to honor Grandpa," Liam said to himself. He rushed home that evening and set everything in motion. He would spend the next 2 years renovating the house. He dipped into his savings and salary, pouring all he could into the renovations. His family and friends laughed at him, with many realtors telling him he was wasting his time. He would prove them wrong. Months passed as Liam poured his soul into renovating the house. He'd kept its original motif, going as far as tracking down 19th century furniture to boost the house's style. When he was finalizing the repairs, people around him started taking notice. They'd started by laughing at him and had ridiculed his efforts for 2 years straight. But through this time, Liam had kept his eyes on the ball, looking to honor his grandpa the best way he could. Liam successfully finished the house, creating a literal time capsule to the 19th century with his design language. By then, he was the talk of Charlestown, a man who'd gone above and beyond to restore a house as an honor to his grandpa, who taught him everything he knew. The buzz spread throughout Boston, and soon enough, respected realtors came asking to acquire the house from Liam. Would he give it up? The house Liam had renovated was 10 feet wide. It fit perfectly with the neighborhood and had the best aesthetics in the entirety of Charlestown. When he finally decided to sell it at auction, he had no idea how big the selling price would go. By the end of the auction, the highest bid was $1.25 million, a price that left Liam speechless. But there was more. The buyer informed Liam that they weren't necessarily going to live in the house, but turn it into a museum to showcase the town's heritage. They would populate it with more 19th century furniture, paintings, and sculptures, and open it to the public eye. Regardless of what they were to do with the home, they would keep its original name given to it by Liam's grandpa. Would he accept such a deal? Liam consulted with his family about letting the house go, and they all agreed that he should follow his heart. He'd started this journey angry at his grandpa for leaving him a derelict house, and now it was about to sell for more than $1 million. Liam weighed everything and saw it would be best to sell the house. Although he'd grown attached to it over the years he'd spent renovating it, he knew it would be the best way forward. But was this the right thing to do? Liam was caught between wanting to keep the house for himself and letting the public have it to celebrate his family's legacy. As he sat pondering the matter, he realized that he'd felt the same way when he heard his grandpa's lawyer read the will. He'd been selfish then, and that wouldn't be the case here. He called the buyer and set everything in motion, knowing that wherever his grandpa was now, he was proud of all Liam had done.